Educating people on drugs is exceptionally important. It's something I've cared about for many, many years. And in this podcast, myself and Fiona are going to discuss some of the main challenges with drugs education. But we're also going to talk about the opportunities that exist for professionals who want to better educate young people and adults around drugs. I've known Fiona for over 8 years, and I think she's one of the most important people in the whole drug education movement. And I cannot think of anyone better to start this series of podcasts to discussing some of the biggest issues. I hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and make sure you check out the Drug Education Forum. You can find our website and details in the description below. So Fiona, what do you think the biggest issues are in the sector of drug education at the moment? And from that chat, we're going to evolve it into some of the opportunities to address those issues. But what do you think some of those main challenges are at the moment?
I think there's a huge challenge around access to really good, current, up-to-date information for people that are working with young people. And we've got to remember, you know, there are those of us that are specialists in the sector, but there are so many people working in the front line with young people for whom having an understanding of the world of substances for young people is really important. Having a really good understanding of what that looks like is really important, and it changes so rapidly. Not just the substances that are available to young people, but contexts of use for young people, access, attitudes, perceptions of attitudes. There are so many different influences on that. And there are so many different factors at work in the decision making for young people as well. So for anybody, any professional, and parents are another thing, but any professional working with young people, having access to information, but also understanding of evidence-based approaches. You know, what does that look like? What kind of messaging has been shown to be effective and ineffective? What can actually end up being harmful, even though that seems very counterintuitive?
We've talked about this a lot in the forum, haven't we? And over the years, that there actually is a lot of information out there on drugs. There's loads of information out there on drugs, because we see it in the media, we see it in film all the time. It's a very dramatised, popular subject. Everyone's got an opinion on it. But because of that, navigating useful information is as difficult as anything else. Because how do you get to the information that's really relevant for you as a professional, or as a parent, or as a friend, or as someone who chooses to use a drug? How do you navigate that information when there's just so much of it? It's very difficult.
And where do you find it? And if you're a busy professional, you've got so many other things you've got to be doing. What's your one-stop shop for a reliable source of information that you can just go to? Yeah,
incredibly difficult. And I guess that, you know, that's a nice opening point, because it's one of the things we've talked a lot about at the DEF. How do we bring together professionals who are interested in that information and present them with trusted people to give messages that are going to be really helpful?
Yeah, absolutely.
And create some of those conversations and create resources.
Yes.
I think one thing we've discussed a lot over the years that we've known each other is one of the challenges we've had in the drug education sector is it's not a lack of professionalism from the people that work in it, because there's some amazing professionals doing a great job, but it's quite a new area. And it's not like something like sex education, which has been around for much longer. We still have issues with sex education. Some of the conversations that professionals are trying to have in school, and some of the conversations you have in school, if we were to timeline that, it's still quite a new initiative.
Yeah, it feels like it's a few decades behind sex education in terms of kind of the acceptability of messages that's for schools and for a universal audience as well. And then in the meantime, in the whole kind of wider sector, there are very, very different conversations going on around policy globally, and the use of psychedelics, you know, and lots of, and that's another thing in terms of currency, is what young people might be picking up in wider media might be very different from what the adults in their lives are tuning into. So the use of psychedelics therapeutically, for example, is something that's a lot of interest in. So how does somebody that's working and has a remit to keep the young people in their care safe, how do you come at that? What do you need to know?
Yeah, even as a professional. Yeah. So I've done a lot of work in the medical cannabis space, and I've done a lot of work talking to kids about how cannabis is dangerous.
Yes.
But there's a real paradox there. It's like someone could be like, oh yeah, medical cannabis is legal, so medical cannabis must be safe. No, of course it's not safe. No. Loads of people have problems with cannabis. Like, no, it's a medical drug, but there's also a discussion to have, which is quite far away from that, around young people's use of a drug. And I think because this is a kind of a new sector, a new space, this is no criticism of anybody, but sometimes those messages and discussions all get a little bit muddled up as well.
There are strong views and strong ideas, and the debate can become quite polarised because it isn't always easy to find a kind of a nuanced space to talk about some of these issues, because there are agendas on either side, which is understandable, but also it's also important that middle ground is okay to inhabit and to bring people into, and to bring each side into as well, without that being too scary.
I agree 100%. What do you, because obviously, like, you know, how many kids do you reckon you've spoken to in schools now?
Oh my goodness, I don't know.
If you have to put
thousands and thousands.
You've probably got over 100,000. Do you reckon you've got 100,000? You'd be crazy numbers.
I mean, in a year, it's more, tens of thousands.
It's a lot. Yeah. So how do you keep up to date with that? Like, what's your advice? Because I agree completely that, like, one of the biggest issues is navigating that information, both the absence and amount of information, ironically. How do you do it?
There's no way around it other than just keeping on top of reading and research and listening, which not everybody can do. And that's, again, I mean, that's in terms of a challenge and opportunity, again, for busy professionals. You need somebody to be doing that for you, really, don't you? But you've just got to be keeping an eye out for what's this research that's just come out. What does that mean? And then interpreting that as well. What does that mean for what we're saying to young people? We were just talking about the piece of research on alcohol, weren't we? So interesting. All the messages of harm to young people, all the negative outcomes there might be from drinking too much alcohol, aren't as powerful as the fear of missing out of the benefits, whether that's the social benefits of not being part of the stories the next day of what everyone got up to the night before, or whatever. But so that's research that's just come out. What do we need to do in terms of the way that we frame messages in schools in the light of that? But then it's just one piece of research. So what does other research say? So it's then that whole kind of bigger picture in terms of evidence. And that's where evidence is so important. But it's also so important to listen to young people as much as possible, to be hearing what they're saying, because what they're saying is often very different from what academics are reporting on, which is often some time down the line from when they actually did the digging into it all themselves, just because of the way academia works. And that's the biggest challenge, isn't it, is then presenting that information to the young people in a way that they can engage with it based upon their experience, rather than like, that's really interesting research, but like, what do we then do? What do we then do with that? How do we take that? How do we manage it? I think that's a very important issue to talk about, because the other thing that then compounds it, I was thinking about earlier, is it's not just finding the information, it's the fact the information changes all the time. So we're then talking about a market that typically sits in an illicit environment, although I don't want to get too lost in the semantics of drugs. Alcohol is legal. I get that, but for a lot of the market, it sits in an illicit market, and that means that there's so much flux and so much change, and there's so much of a kind of taboo issue over the subjects, that it's very difficult to keep on, not only find information, but then keep up to date, up to that trend, which changes all the time. It does change all the time, and there are so many different sources of information as well. So it's not just, I mean, I was talking about academic papers, but you've got stuff like data from Border Force, you've got all the whole kind of enforcement space and what they're saying. You've got all the data that comes out of treatment, and you've got not just data, but you've got the stories and what's the real stuff that's going on in people's lives. And for young people as well, what are they digesting? So what is it in the whatever's the drama on Netflix that everyone's looking at, or whatever, and what that might be doing in terms of shifting perceptions of risk or acceptability or consequences, and that can go in all sorts of different directions. But there's a whole there's a whole world of influence that you also need to be aware of, because those social influences, whether it's through media or in real life, it's so important for adolescence, which is our main concern, because of all the vulnerabilities there are.
Yeah,
so
100%. And this one thing we've seen a lot in the work that we've done is different demographics and kind of subcultures of taking drugs in completely different ways as well.
Yes.
So even, we could meet professionals all up and down the country, and, we speak to people all up and down the country, don't we, that work in different elements of drug education, and people will be like, oh, we don't get that down here. The kids don't use that like that down here. So even you have to navigate that within the kind of niche of the people that you're working with, and you have to equip yourself with the knowledge to be able to navigate quite different experiences and perceptions around drugs.
Yes.
Based on loads of things.
Yes.
Loads of demographics, which adds another complication.
So it's a challenge. So we're talking about challenges and opportunities. So we need to frame this as an opportunity now.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a great opportunity, because the debate, we said this, I keep saying we've said this over the years, but this is definitely something we've said a lot over the years, is that drug education is not quite mainstream in the sense that schools are including it as standard as part of their curriculum. But the conversation is absolutely going in the right direction. Yes. And I think in the time that we've known each other, we were saying before, we've known each other for like maybe 8 years now,
yes,
like eight years. In that time, I think there's been great progress, and there's a great opportunity now for people to come together and start saying, okay, great, how do we best protect young people when it comes to drug-related issues? And I think there are lots of toolkits that people can learn about. There are lots of groups, organisations such as yourself, that any school in the country could say, please come and help. There is an opportunity here to educate young people. Please come into the school. So I think for professionals that have the best interests of the young people at heart, there are absolutely groups and people that can help. And I think that is a great opportunity, because we do, as professionals that work in the space, we do find it very difficult navigating this subject, but we do it, and we do a good job, and we're out here, we can help. So I think the opportunity is recognising that help's available, joining the DEF. So it's becoming like a hard pitch for the DEF.
Join the drug education.
Join the drug education forum. Just come and there's a lot of groups and organisations that will bite schools' hands off, or universities, colleges, schools, parents. If you come to them and say, I would like some information about drugs because I want to better protect this person or that group, there are loads of people out there who will come to your aid. I think that's a great opportunity to start. No, it is absolutely.
And I think on both, there've been, over the time that we've known each other, there's been a shift. And, our drug education charity has been running for 11 years now, and there's definitely been a shift in that time, so in the last decade, at kind of policy end, but also practice end, where by drug education is now statutory in schools in England anyway, so schools got to be doing something, but there's also been a shift in terms of prevention being something that's more in focus than it's ever been. Drug education still needs the drum banging for it in that space as part of that wider prevention piece. It absolutely has to be there, and universal drug education as well. And that has really changed. When I started the charity all that time ago, the messaging around universal drug education was that it just doesn't work. It's a waste of money. Most people don't use drugs, and mostly they don't come to harm. So what is the point in educating them? Because they're going to be fine. What we need to do is take out the groups that are really vulnerable and just work with them. And it was really frustrating because there are lots of young people that do come to harm. Numerically, the ones that come to harm are going to be from that bigger mass. Most of them won't. Most young people don't use drugs, and most don't come to harm, and that's brilliant. But some of them do, and we're leaving them incredibly vulnerable if we don't arm them also to look out for their friends. It's not just looking out for each other, it's that social space where alcohol and other drugs are encountered. But so that has shifted. Drug education is now statutory in schools in England. There is an expectation that they are all doing something. So on
what
that
look like does vary.
Well,
I put that disclaimer of what that looks like.
Exactly, that's another challenge. But I think there's an increased understanding and value of evidence-based approaches. However, there is an enormous gap really in terms of an understanding of what that means. But that's another reason why we put all this energy behind the Drug Education Forum, because really, how would you necessarily know that unless somebody tells you? Because again, that's somebody doing that research for the people that are out there. What do we know about what works and what doesn't work? We do know a lot. Another challenge, but another opportunity, is that there are lots of gaps in that evidence base. But that's another, again, where opportunity has been created, is that the government did invest in research through the NIHR, the Innovation Fund. So there will be outcomes that come from that. We're just in phase 2 at the moment. Phase 3 is applications open. They're not actually. I think applications have closed for stage 1 of that. Sorry, too late. However, that there will be findings from that which will add to that evidence base. So that there is an increasing range of good evidence-based resources, support, people that know what they're doing and know how to do it well. On the other hand, there are also there's a lot of stuff, and also people that would benefit from support and training and kind of current.
Yeah. It kind of touches on one of the things that I was
trying to say that really sensitively.
No, I think the morality of drugs and the feelings that it invokes when we talk about it bring a lot of things with it. It's not like if we're educating young people on road safety, which obviously is important as well, right? You've got to teach
really
kids how to be around a road.
Wear a bike helmet.
Yeah, we're always wearing a bike helmet. Like really important stuff, but it doesn't really invoke a great deal of morality. Other people don't like cyclists generally, but it doesn't invoke a great deal of morality. So you can educate someone on road safety without getting too caught up in any feelings. But when we then say, okay, road safety is important, so is drugs education, let's talk to people about drugs. People have different reactions, moral reactions based on experiences and perceptions and upbringings and the media, films they've seen, popular culture, books that they've read. And that then creates good things in the sense that people become passionate. That's great. Passion is good. Passion inspires and passion is an energy that can be used, which is great. But sometimes that passion can come have a negative effect in that the passion can take you down a particular route, a particular way of thinking, a particular way of working, a particular position, a particular ideological position and moral position. And I think, again, I think it's getting better over the time we've been working in the space, but it's still something that we find people falling over. And the morality of the issue is something I think we need to try and find some distance from. And it can lead to people going into schools and saying particular things, ideas and approaches, which I'm not saying aren't for every, there may be some people that resonate with that, but if we were to go to the evidence, and we know we've had many people looked at evidence over the years, there are approaches that are known to be really effective, and they're not. Yeah, they're not those messages that some people can kind of pick up and bang the drum with.
Even though it might seem a really that's an obvious thing that you need to do. I mean, the shock tactics thing is one thing, isn't it, in terms of approaches? That's not something that we were particularly talking about beforehand. But it's for schools. That seems like a really obvious thing to do. We'll get someone in with a terrible story,
get a police officer come in and show a jail cell.
To all the awful outcomes there could be, and those, or the terrible things that have happened to young people that have died from drugs, and show just those. That's just an example of one of the bits of evidence that is maybe counterintuitive in terms of what has been effective and ineffective. And also, I mean, now of course we've got much better understanding of trauma-informed approaches. Yeah. That's not always going to be something that's going to be harm-free for young people as well. But no, when we're talking about that more nuanced space in the middle, the polarization, I think it's a tricky one. But I mean, it's the same, I guess, as sex education, isn't it? In terms of that there are ethics around it, and different families will have different values and different. Yeah. But in terms of the harm and risks that drugs can have, the balance between that the just say no message we know doesn't work, but it's also true that that's going to always going to be your safest
this is
option.
the kind of
The only risk-free way of using drugs is not to use drugs.
Take drugs. And I think that is the nuance of the drug education element, is it? Because I think you don't want to go to any extreme, but you don't want to rule out a position that will help someone live a healthy life.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the tension point that can be the tension point with harm reduction. And I think there are lots of people that we know that we speak to on the DEF, that we've got loads of time for, who are incredible harm reduction advocates and speak with such nuance and clarity.
Absolutely. And that is so important. That's such important work.
Yeah.
In a universal audience, that has to be handled really, really carefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so important that young people have got an understanding of where to go for, and an understanding of what that might look like.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's also really important that doesn't kind of negate messaging around the risks and the options that you've got. And of course, always as well, it's really, really important to bring to all of that an understanding for the adults working with young people of the really powerful role that social drivers play for young people in adolescence. That is such a, I mean, we all know that, of course we all know that, but you can't come at drug education without a really comprehensive understanding of the way that adolescent brain development impacts decision making and understanding and management of risk. Because it's almost always going to be in a social space where drugs are encountered, at least initially, if not progressively. But agree
100%. And I think that prevention point is really important, and recognizing that, like, you know, there is an opportunity here for drug education to evolve, because there has been a broadening of the remit of the discussion. It's not just about harm reduction. It's not just like, oh, drug education is going into schools and saying to kids, you know, people take drugs, here's what you need to know. You know, but it's also not going in and saying, don't take drugs.
Drugs are bad, you'll
Thanks
die.
for the discussion.
Yeah,
you know, there
exactly.
There is a really healthy
that
position that's well equipped with evidence-based ways of speaking to young people, that I think it's definitely going in the right direction. And I encourage anyone who watches this that wants to help better protect kids to speak to organisations and groups who can come into schools and do some of that work, because it's the other challenge. It's not easy, is it? It's very difficult talking to kids about, like, it's not easy. It's quite a challenging subject to just own and talk to kids about. It is,
but it's also something that kids are really interested in.
Oh yeah.
So
big time.
I mean, if you do it well, you've got them. Yeah, because it is so interesting and it's relevant, and it's
refreshing for the kids.
So much stuff they want to know.
It's refreshing. They're
Absolutely,
like, oh, cool, okay.
Yeah,
you know,
because of course their teachers, they're going to expect them to just go. And you know, before anybody goes into schools, probably most of the time, they're expecting you to say, drugs are bad, don't do drugs, and that's the message.
Yeah.
And then when it's not that, that's kind of, oh, okay.
It takes them back. Like, wait a minute, not getting.
Yeah, it's not the drugs aren't bad. Doing them is always going to be a good option, but there's a lot that is really useful to know and understand.
100%.
If you're going to keep yourself safe, which is ultimately what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the morality element in terms of resolving that is very challenging, because we're talking about like a really big, complex issue there that's been around forever, and, you know, studied criminology, and there is a real depth to our perceptions and ideas around drugs that goes back a very, very, very long time. But an opportunity that I'm seeing, and a couple of really refreshing calls I've had recently with journalists, have been journalists approaching this issue and saying, we actually don't want to do the kind of really scary, kind of clickbaity story. Instead, we want to do more of an investigation and uncover a broader spectrum, or, you know, lift the lid on what's going on across a broader demographics around drug use. And I was like, this is great. That's a really good way of reporting and thinking and talking about drugs, because so much of our perceptions around drugs are absorbed, you know, developed through the media.
Yes.
That if journalists show that kind of curiosity around the subject and resist that temptation to be like, let's kind of find the scariest, most dramatic, craziest thing, and say, well, let's actually paint a picture that will help educate society on where this is at. I think that's a really good thing. I think that's an excellent
it's really important not to forget there are some great people working in that space and doing research in a different, we talk about research thinking of academics, but there are lots of people doing research, but in that media space. And that's a really, in terms of digestible communication of really important information and issues. Has that shifted? Is that something that
I think it's got, but I think,
it's better.
Not to sidetrack us too much, but I think the sign of collapse of the mainstream media has been really helpful there. So I think historically, I think papers kind of relied on big, kind of stressful, scary headlines and like, that's what sold papers. But now I think the way we digest digital content, that sort of content obviously exists. There's loads of clickbaity kind of dramatic stuff, but I think journalists are trying to readjust a lot of their reporting or what they're doing into a bit more of an investigative type approach, just because.
And that is really important because the media has such a responsibility, especially, and there's still the kind of pandemic. Everyone's doing this, everyone's dying, that dramatic headline does sell papers.
It gets people clicking.
People clicking, the kind of online equivalent. And so that hasn't gone. And of course that there is really good evidence that risks an increase in use. So there's a huge responsibility that the press, the media plays in making things worse. Yeah,
100%. So that encouraged journalists that are interested in really good investigative stories, uncover, because we spend a lot, you were speaking to a journalist before coming here, spend a lot of time helping journalists navigate this space. So if the journalists watching, do get in touch with us at the forum. We can help you connect with people that will have really interesting insights, but insights that are going to lead to better education rather than scaremongering.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Yeah.
What other issues do you think kind of spring to mind then on drugs education?
Well, I mean, one of the issues, speaking as someone running a small charity, there's always an issue around funding, and that's something that has just got harder and harder. And there are dire warnings that this next year is going to be even worse for many charities and organisations because costs are going up, funding's harder to get hold of. And demand is increasing as well in many places. And of course, school budgets are under a huge amount of pressure as well. And now not just state schools, but independent schools as well with changes. Whatever your views on those, it means that the funding available. And that, of course, impacts drug education in lots of different ways. And not just in terms of provision, but also in terms of the access to support, and that includes networks. And one of the things that has kind of, I mean, it's partly COVID put an end to in-person things completely, of course, didn't it? And we've now online get-togethers are, being able to be together with other people to learn together. It's amazing that we can do so much now with people all over the place, right around the world, right across the country. We don't have to be together in person, but we also lose such a lot now that we used to have, where there were networks of people, and that peer support and peer learning was so incredibly valuable. And I think everybody misses that so much. And some of that's to do with funding. There was funding available to create networks and spaces where that could happen, and some of it is time, and that relates to funding, and
which we've replicated this in the forum, haven't we? So for people that don't know about the Drug Education Forum, we'll have meetings, and how many people do we like?
It's more than 200. The rest,
the forums that we do online, and one thing we've tried to do is kind of replicate an element of that, where say to people, if you want to hang around, we're going to put people into breakout rooms, and you can just kind of chat about the work that you're doing and kind of do some of that networking, because it
brings together a really diverse group of people as well, working in very different spaces. And there's the space afterwards where you can actually be together, albeit virtually, and chat. But also the chat is a really great space in these things, isn't it?
Loads
where
of people sharing
interact
ideas
a lot
and
resources and evidence, and it's those spaces to get together with people, because often in drug education, people are working in quite isolated ways. You know, you've got some lone practitioners who are out there all the time doing really important work, but very much in their own little silo. And it's really important that they're able to get together with other people that are doing that, but maybe with more of a structure of support around them.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, we're always open to ideas of how we can do that at the Drug Education Forum, or things that people are doing out there by which there are opportunities to network and share ideas.
And I think it would be great to be able to do some in-person things, wouldn't it? It's just,
we were just saying before, we haven't seen each other for years.
I know, so well, we see each other all the time, but actually not in real life.
Drugs or so long ago. So mad.
Yeah.
So with all these kind of challenges that we've laid out then, and opportunities that exist, what are your kind of hopes for the next couple of years with regards to drug education? What kind of would you like to see come into place?
Well, I think it's a really great time for drug education, actually, or a good time is coming, because I think with the kind of the policy shifts, although that said, we've got to see the new government's drug strategy, but there doesn't seem to be any sense that that's going to move dramatically from what was there, and so the value that's placed on drug education for all young people, that seems to be something that is now universally recognised. I think it's a very different place for we are a universal drug education provider, but there are many others out there, and universal drug education is absolutely vital. All young people need access to really good evidence-based drug education, because all young people are encountering risks relating to drugs. It's 100%. Really difficult to avoid now in a very different way. So I don't think there's ever been a greater need for really good drug education for all young people. And I think the shifts that there have been over the last decade mean that there is now, there's a recognition of that, which means there's an opportunity for that to be being done, and being done well in more places. Yeah.
And I think it's one of the things we talked about with a podcast and the emergence of digital media is a great opportunity to provide some of those resources to young people and professionals.
Yeah,
straight
absolutely,
away.
Absolutely.
The networking point is really important for professionals, but on the flip side, that digital world we're now in means that if you have good information, good ideas, you can get it out there.
Yes.
You say, there you go, there's this thing. It doesn't have, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, the idea of making a video series about XYZ would have taken...
Yeah, oh my God, you had to get film crew, it would cost tens of thousands of pounds,
So I think it's a great opportunity for the work that the Drug Education Forum and colleagues that we have just that work in the sector to grasp that and go, here you go, here are resources, ideas, information, contact people that will help address the issue, because I agree with you, it's really, really important conversation. It's so nice to actually do a podcast and chat with you, Fiona.
It's been such a joy. I know. All these years.
We've done TV interviews and stuff. You've done like stuff with BBC and with like journalists.
We've never done a podcast.
No, sounds on a podcast. So. Fiona, thanks for joining us.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Show. I'm sure we'll have you on again
for hours.
Oh, same. No, love your company. And to people that have watched, just visit the Drug Education website. It's in the description below. Come learn more about the work that we're doing. You can attend our events. We have some incredible speakers who give really, really good, up-to-date information on drug-related issues. And there's hundreds of people that attend. You'll meet colleagues doing similar work and get more information. So thanks for watching. Check out the Drug Education Forum, and we'll see you next time.